Hello everyone, welcome to Straight Talks F1. And yet again, Charles Leclerc has won a race which has made me delay my podcast for a week. I did not expect this. Charles Leclerc winning Monza. Yes, Ferrari do well at Monza every year. They aim to be on the podium or win the race. But this year, it all seemed like a McLaren show. They had a front row lockout. Ferrari were there behind them a tenth and a half, but it did not seem like they would challenge for the win. And then we had McLaren doing Ferrari things in Ferrari's home. And the Scuderia, on that matter, were brilliant with their strategy. The exceptional masterstroke to stay out on the one stopper on a weekend where everyone was confused about the strategy, whether to one stop or two stop. That was the question. McLaren gave in to the pressure of the tire degradation they faced, and Ferrari were the one to risk it. And they usually risk it, but they risk it in the wrong direction. For a change, it was the right call, and they have been making such right calls, no denying that. But it was a masterclass at Monza by Ferrari. And McLaren, on the other hand, they just continued to be stupid in terms of their championship battle. Like Lando Norris and McLaren can co-author a book entitled it 7 Ways to Self-Sabotage. Like for a change, Lando Norris had a good start. He covered off Piastri into the first chicane, but then he again left the door open out of Curva Grande, and Piastri just walked through it. An exceptional and audacious move around the outside of the De La Roggia chicane. Not many can stick it out at that corner without crashing. And of course, Lando Norris backed out of it to not crash. But then that's the thing. Piastri stamped his authority on Norris, saying, "That's my corner, that's my line, I'm taking the race lead. Bye bye." But yeah, all in all, another McLaren fumble, another Lando Norris fumble. And while they have gained points on Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, they are just 8 points off Red Bull now, which was 30 points before the Italian Grand Prix. But the fact that Norris was able to only gain 8 points on Max Verstappen, it does not seem good for his Drivers' Championship, with only 8 races left. And Will Buxton was on point. While Norris fumbled race wins, McLaren not implementing team orders is going to be a huge deal for their Drivers' Championship battle. They had the chance to convince Piastri to act as the rear gunner behind Norris and bring home a 1-2 with Norris winning. But they let their drivers race. Papaya rules or whatever the hell they want to call it. But the papaya definitely ends sweet to McLaren for now. And Will Buxton was on point. They are going to throw it away. The way McLaren is approaching the Drivers' Championship, they are going to throw away a chance to win both titles this year, particularly when Red Bull and Verstappen are struggling so much. And this is the time, before they recover in the final stint of the season, this is the time for McLaren to make hay. But they are not doing it, which is absolutely frustrating. So I'm going to dive deep on all those aspects. But let's first start with the masterclass by Ferrari and Leclerc. Now, this wasn't a race for Ferrari to win at all. As I said, McLaren was better. This was their race to win. So, when we look at that result, it seems like a 50-50 split or a 50-50 blame between McLaren bottling it and Ferrari's strategy coming right one of the rare times, of course. But full credit to them, full credit to the Ferrari pit wall to take that risk on the one stopper where we've seen them make some abysmal tire choices, unnecessary pit stop choices. This was top tier strategy from Ferrari, and Charles Leclerc backed it up. He was a bit disappointed when McLaren undercut him at the first pit stop, but then he produced a metronomic stint, I would say. From lap 18 till the last lap, lap 53, his pace was within 5/10 of a second. He was that consistent on the hard tire. Barring one lap that went into the 124s, his lap times were between 123.3 and 123.8. Pure masterclass by Leclerc. The way he managed his tires, the way he maintained his pace, beautiful stuff. So there was a lot of skill from Charles Leclerc there to justify Ferrari's call. And again, on this weekend as well, he was beating himself a bit. After qualifying on Saturday, he qualified 4th, the 10th and a half of pole, and he was still beating him up like he qualified 15th. That's what Will Buxton said. And fair enough, there was no need to beat himself up so much because he was in 4th and there was all the chance he could get the podium on Sunday. It was George Russell in 3rd, and the kind of pace Ferrari had, they were easily going to beat Mercedes, and they were sort of in contention to fight McLaren as well, or at least give them a tough time. So there was no point of being self-critical over there after he qualified 4th and a 10th and a half second of pole, because Ferrari made a good step up with their upgrades in Monza. They had a wretched run of races after the Monaco GP, the double DNF of Canada, their awful pace in Spain, Silverstone, Austria. It just wasn't there. They had regressed to be the 4th fastest team perhaps. So now it remains to be seen whether this performance in Monza, whether it was circuit specific or this is a recovery by Ferrari of its early season form maybe. And I said this before in the Dutch GP episode as well. Ferrari are not far behind McLaren and Red Bull in the constructors. They were 64 points of Red Bull before Italy. Now they're 39 points behind Red Bull. And yes, McLaren is closing up and they also have a great trajectory at the moment. If Ferrari can be on par with them like they were in Monza and perhaps improve a bit more to be consistent across all tracks, we could very well see Ferrari win the Constructors this year. The Drivers' Championship is a bit out of sight for Leclerc, that's for sure. But yeah, this is something I'm going to elaborate later about how it could be a three-way fight for constructors. But kudos to Leclerc and Ferrari for their masterclass, and I hope that they continue this form away from Monza as well, particularly the way McLaren is bottling race wins. We have seen Mercedes win 3 races already. Ferrari have also won 3 races. They could win 3 or 4 more the way McLaren is performing if they can maintain their pace that we saw in Monza. Now McLaren have developed a bad habit. They're throwing away good results left, right and center. I can't harp on this enough about the several missed opportunities of winning races over the past 2 months. Since Miami, Italy would be the 4th or 5th race that McLaren and Norris have fumbled, and fumbled it hard. And once again, they threw away the win in Monza with their strategy and team orders. And it was a victory that could have bolstered Norris's championship bid. But no, they let their rivals race. So what was Oscar Piastri supposed to do? He did not break any rules. Zach Brown said we do not have any number 1, number 2 driver setting. We have 2 number 1 drivers. So Piastri obliged on that. If they are on equal terms, he stamped his authority. He got ahead of Norris. They could have convinced Piastri to act as the rear gunner to Norris. They could have told him that, hey Oscar, Lando's got a better chance at winning the Drivers' Championship. He's 70 points behind. You are more than 100 points behind. With 8 races or 9 races left, he has the better chance. And Oscar Piastri is a level-headed, logical person. He would have understood it. He would have understood saying, alright, if you feel Lando's got the better chance, let's back him. I'll act as the rear gunner for him. I don't think he would have resisted it too much, saying that he's still got a mathematical chance to win the Drivers' Championship. While that is true, it will require a lot more, several outside factors to influence the championship standings. We may have to see Verstappen see a couple of DNFs maybe, and we have to see Piastri catch the gap to Norris. So McLaren had the clear chance to orchestrate a 1-2 lead at the start, with Norris leading and Piastri in second. They could have had the maximum points haul from Italy, with Red Bull being out of the top 5. Remember, Verstappen finished P6. Despite everyone expecting that perhaps Verstappen and Red Bull could make a comeback in the race, and that they are faster than what was seen in qualifying, that did not happen. So with Norris having a 70-point deficit, They could have made a big swing on Verstappen. Had McLaren orchestrated that 1-2 and they had the pace to keep everyone behind. Obviously, they would have had to figure out the one stop strategy there, but that 70-point lead would have come down to 52 with Norris taking the fastest lap and winning the race. The additional 10 points make a huge difference. So it was just nonsensical of McLaren to not capitalize on this chance of making a huge dent in Verstappen's championship lead. Like the lion is literally wounded. Red Bull have an ailing car at the moment with multiple issues. A stiff suspension, a rumored asymmetric braking ban, there are issues with the handling of that car, the car just doesn't turn and produces a lot of understeer, and McLaren even have better wind tunnel time, given they are still second in the championship, and they have been second in the championship since June and July, they will have 5% more wind tunnel time. The car performance, the car handling, everything is in McLaren's favor. They've got two drivers as well to hammer it out in the Constructors' Championship. And they are not capitalizing on that. At this moment, Norris should be running away with the title. And of course, because he and McLaren started the season slow, there is this deficit of 60-70 points. But he should be covering that up quickly. So even Norris hasn't delivered. He's fumbling on his deliverables, with the race start particularly. He's basically removing himself out of the win contention at the start and then mounting a charge from the back. That's not going to work at every track. He was lucky in Zandvoort, a track that is difficult to overtake, that he got back the lead. Monza is also a notoriously difficult track to overtake. It seems like a very high speed track and you can overtake easily, but it's actually not. And Norris paid the price for it. He fumbled the race start. Of course, partially Piastri and McLaren are also to blame over there, but Piastri did what he's supposed to do. Norris and McLaren did not do what they're supposed to do. Naturally, Piastri wasn't going to hold back. He wanted to go for the win. So if Norris can't hold him behind, that's not on Piastri. It was quite confusing over there with the Papaya rules and everything. It seems like a very gimmicky thing to do. It's an obvious thing any team would not want their drivers to crash while they are racing each other. To make it under the moniker Papaya rules and everything, fair enough, you want to say that and you want to keep two equal drivers. But then on the other hand, they are in a situation where they have to prioritize one of them for the drivers' championship. So these Papaya rules of engagement, they don't make sense right now. They may make sense in 2025 when Norris and Piastri are basically 5 or 10 points apart and fighting for the championship, then that makes sense. But with Norris having a better shot at the Drivers' Championship, it does not make sense to me. It just does not make sense the way McLaren has bottled a sure shot 1-2 at Monza. Now, overall, Lando Norris is a quicker driver than Oscar Piastri, or like that's what the narrative says. Norris's race pace has been better than Piastri. In the 1.5 seasons they have been teammates together, but still on raw pace, they are an exceptionally equal teammate pairing. The average qualifying gap between them is less than a tenth of a second. It's few hundreds between them, and they are one of the closest driver pairings on the grid. Only Leclerc and Sainz and Hamilton and Russell come close to them in terms of that average qualifying gap. So that's the thing. Norris having better race pace, as they say, and Piastri is caught up on it, but still Norris might be slightly ahead by a margin, and he has fumbled multiple race wins or multiple good results. If not the win, he could have got better podium results, and Italy was another one of those. As I said earlier, he got a good start into the turn 1 chicane, but then he left the door wide open into the second chicane, and Piastri overpowered him. And this is the thing. Many experts said this, if it was Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, they won't be overtaken like that by their teammates. And just in case, even if they do get overtaken, they would look to get back in front as quickly as possible. Lando Norris lacked that. He's lacking that aggressive attitude. He's lacking that mindset to stamp his authority. And I feel Oscar Piastri, just being in a sophomore season, just his second year in F1, he's showing that ruthless attitude a lot more. So Norris just cannot afford to get beaten by Piastri like that. Considering the broader context of the championship, he can't afford that at the moment. They are equal drivers, and you can obviously say McLaren want to keep it as equal as possible. They don't want to enforce team orders. And even Norris said that I don't want to beg someone for race wins. I want to win the championship and win races on my merit, which is fair, but then he's got to show it. If he wants to retain that pride of winning the championship on his own merit, he needs to show it on track. That's not there. And there's nothing about him being too nice or anything to Piastri or to Verstappen or anyone else. He just needs to go out there and win. He needs to beat everyone, win races in the fastest car that he's got, and everything else will fall in place. The Drivers' Championship, the Constructors' Championship for McLaren, everything else will come to him. But he has left points on the table. He has left a lot of race wins on the table. And speaking of point scoring, F1 posted a graphic about the European leg of the season and who are the top point scorers in that phase. Oscar Piastri has scored the most points in Europe, 146 points to his name. Norris is not far behind. He's in third place with 140 points. And Max Verstappen, despite having that awful car, is still second with 142 points. So it's insane to think that Piastri is the highest point scorer. Speaks a lot about his consistency, but on the other hand, it also speaks volumes about how many race wins and how many points has Norris left on the table. I feel Norris is much better than that, given that his race pace has been better over the past 1.5 years. He should have scored at least 20 points more, or even maybe 25 or 30 points more than Oscar Piastri in this European leg of the season. The fact that he's 6 points behind Piastri, that speaks a lot. And yeah, that is that. As I said, Norris left the door wide open and Piastri has walked through it. Not just in Monza, overall in the championship and their dynamic as a teammate duo at McLaren. It's one thing to convincingly dominate and beat someone like Daniel Ricciardo, who was perhaps in the second half of his career already, and everyone knows how Daniel Ricciardo struggled at McLaren. But to beat a consistently performing driver like Oscar Piastri, who's got an impeccable junior record and is better than Lando Norris honestly at the F3 and the F2 level. He won F3 and F2 in his rookie season. That should have been Norris's real litmus test, but he's not there. And the bigger litmus test is obviously fighting Verstappen for the championship. Now that Verstappen doesn't have a fast car, it isn't as big of a litmus test, but still, the kind of drive Verstappen produced in Zandvoort, kind of drive Verstappen produced in Silverstone, he can still eke out a fabulous result in a dog of a car. So Norris still has a very high level of benchmark to meet, and I feel he's not meeting it. And Gunther Steiner said upon this as well, he doesn't know or he's unsure whether Norris deserves to win the championship or not. So yeah, if Norris wants to win his maiden world championship this year, he needs to step up big time. Now, I had said this that Ferrari had dropped back in performance, but not in the standings. They were still holding P2 before McLaren overtook them, obviously, but the points gap wasn't as big to the top. They were there or thereabouts, and I said that if and when they recover their performance in the second half of the year, they would come back in the fight for the Constructors' Championship. And that's the thing, currently they are not far off Red Bull and McLaren. 39 points to Red Bull, 31 points to McLaren. One good race, one more or two more good races like Monza, and they are knocking on Red Bull's door like McLaren is right now. So it is imperative for Ferrari, if they want to fight for the constructors this year, they have to carry forward the Monza performance into other races. Because on the other hand, McLaren seems set to take the lead in Baku. 8 points between them and Red Bull. The way Red Bull is going, I don't see them holding off that lead for long. And as for Red Bull, they need a huge renaissance in their car performance. And they have teased upgrades for the US GP in Kota, but that's still a month and a half away. They have a double header in Baku and Singapore, and those are not two tracks Red Bull would have wanted at this time of the year. Last year's Singapore GP is a perfect case in point of the issues Red Bull will face in Baku and Singapore. The bumps and the curbs of those two street circuits is just going to further torment the issues of the RB20 currently. So Red Bull have a big task at hand. They will be in the lower fringes of the points in Baku and Singapore, that's for sure. They'll be lucky to get in the top 5 if any chaos unfolds over there. Like at this stage, the way Red Bull is going, Verstappen said so clearly, the current car performance is not going to yield them any more race wins till the end of the season. They need upgrades to get back into podium contention and win contention. And as for the driver's title, Norris needs to step up now. I can't harp on this enough. And McLaren need to pull out every trick out of the book. If they have to convince Piastri to act as the rear gunner, they have to do it. If they have to implement team orders whenever required, they have to do it. Because with a 62-point gap and 8 races left, if Verstappen and Red Bull somehow recover in Kota and get back into win contention, McLaren will be ruining the missed opportunities in the last 3 months. They'll regret it bad, and I feel even if Red Bull lose the constructors, Verstappen may somehow hold on to that drivers' championship. Because Norris is not being ruthless enough. He should have several more race wins under his belt. He should be a lot more aggressive with his championship bid. And he's not. That's where Verstappen can be a bit comfortable and at ease, despite him not being at ease with the car. But in the broader context of the championship, I still feel Max Verstappen can become a 4-time world champion this year. But yeah, that Constructors' Championship, I'm really excited for Ferrari and McLaren. Particularly Ferrari, if they somehow produce a miracle to win that championship for the first time since 2008, damn, that would be crazy. Now, Kevin Magnussen has been banned for the Azerbaijan GP, and this race ban was lurking in the shadows for him since the start of the season. In May, after his shenanigans in Miami, he had 10 penalty points accumulated on a super license. After that, he had a massive crash in Monaco with Perez and Hulkenberg, and everyone thought, alright, he's getting 2 more penalty points, and that will be a race ban for Canada. That did not happen. For some reason, the stewards did not give him penalty points for that massive crash in Monaco, which was odd. And then come to Monza, he's got 2 penalty points besides the 10-second time penalty for a collision with Pierre Gasly, which did not seem as severe to his Monaco crash or even stand alone to look at this incident. Even Gasly said the same, that he does not understand the logic of giving him 2 penalty points for that collision. A 5 or 10-second time penalty is understandable. You want to avoid that sort of a collision. He locked up and he had that collision. But Gasly carried on with his race without any issues. So there were no huge repercussions for Gasly. But they always say, the stewards, that they consider the event or the incident alone and not its repercussions for any of the drivers. But there is sort of an inconsistency over there that they did not penalize Magnussen in Monaco, but they are adding 2 more penalty points to his super license for this collision in Monza, which sort of perhaps only deserved the time penalty, I feel. And even Gasly said so, that he doesn't want to see Magnussen getting a race ban because of that collision. But again, Magnussen has had a history of such kind of maneuvers. He's got several penalty points for several maneuvers this season. And yes, overall his driving is a bit dangerous at times. No denying that. But is it so much dangerous to earn him so many penalties? I don't think so. I feel the stewards are a bit harsh at him at times. Is it because of his history and reputation with such maneuvers such aggressive driving. Ideally, there should not be any such bias towards any drivers. There is also the notion that Fernando Alonso often speaks about, that there is an inherent bias in F1 against non-British drivers. They would often get more penalties and their penalties are much more severe. But I don't know if that's a valid explanation. That would be quite naive to say if there is such bias in penalty points decisions or in giving time penalties from the stewards. Ideally, that should not be the case, and realistically, also, that would not be the case. But then there are incidents like Saudi Arabia this year when Lando Norris had a false race start. He had moved before the lights went out, and because the sensors did not pick it up, he wasn't penalized for that, which was again odd because exactly a year ago, Fernando Alonso got a 5-second penalty for not aligning in his grid slot correctly. And even Esteban Ocon got a penalty for the same, a race before that in Bahrain. So yeah, the nationality bias is just a fan theory perhaps, hopefully. And this could be a case about Magnussen's past reputation. And yes, agreed, his driving is the most dangerous perhaps of the current grid in terms of endangering other drivers while racing. I don't think any other driver puts such aggressive maneuvers besides him. But yeah, like that's that. Kevin Magnussen has got a race ban in what would likely be his final season for the time being. Once again, he is going to leave F1 with Haas replacing him, or Haas not choosing to renew his contract. They've got Behrman and Ocon for next season, so Magnussen will have one race less. He'll return in Singapore, but for Baku, they have replaced him with Oliver Behrman, who has another chance to prove himself after Jeddah this year, and he's already got the full-time seat, so there's nothing to prove. It's just that he's got a good chance to showcase what he can do in the car that he's going to drive next year. So yeah, good luck to Oliver Behrman for that. That would be interesting to see how he fares in Baku, a difficult street circuit again, just like Jeddah. So he's got a high benchmark test again, just that this time he'll do the entire weekend rather than jumping into FP3. But a hard luck for Kevin Magnussen, and hopefully he comes back strong in Singapore. He scored a point as well in Monza, so that's a one valuable point for Haas. But hopefully K-Mag bounces back well. Williams sacking Logan Sargeant midway through the season. I did not see that coming, particularly when James Vowles had replaced him with Carlos Sainz for next season. He'd gotten a proven race winner like Sainz, so he had about 8 or 9 races to stick it out with Sargeant. But I think he just had it all with him. He lost patience with Sargent's crashes, and that crash in Sandwood FP3, that was perhaps the last straw for Sargeant. And James Vowles, he's a very straightforward man, and he doesn't like it when things go way off his expectations and way off his plans. And Sargeant was that outlier to his plans for reviving Williams. The way he crashed his performance deficit to Alex Albon, that was certainly alarming, which is why he chose to replace him with Carlos Sainz, because James Vowles wants the best drivers. And he's definitely got the ambition to get Williams back into championship contention. He wants to revive the team's days from the 80s and 90s when the team was a championship winning and a race winning outfit consistently. That's the reason he's brought in Carlos Sainz. And Alex Albon is already a solid driver for them. He's carrying the team Albon over the past 2 years. So Sargeant was nowhere near those benchmarks, and I think Vowles just lost patience with him. So to double down on his decision to replace him with Sainz for next year, to bring in a temporary replacement midway through the 2024 season, I think it shows Vowles' ambition. It shows what he wants with the team, and that's definitely not a crash happy driver like Sargeant, who's costing them a lot of money in terms of repair bills. You don't want a driver like that. And James Vowles seems quite ruthless over there to take that tough call. It's a very tough call on Sargeant. You got a feel for him. No driver, no young driver like him would want his career to end like this. And it seems like it's an abrupt end to his F1 career. I don't think any other team would want to hire him now. Maybe few years down the line he comes back, I don't know if he does well elsewhere. But like Mazepin, like Latifi, like Nick De Vries, I think Sargent is gone for good from F1. For his good, because he just wasn't living up to it. That Zandvoort crash, it was a big one, and that was perhaps the last straw for him, because Williams is a cash-strapped team. They have investors now in Torrelton Capital who are investing in the growth of the team, but at the same time they are still a small team. Being a backmarker and a cash-strapped team, they can't afford to incur such huge damage bills, and the frequency of it, once in a while, understandable, like Alex Albon had earlier in Australia this year, but since then he hasn't crashed it as often. His crash in Japan was also a bit of a collision with Ricciardo. Barring that, Albon has been exceptionally clean with his driving. It's been Sargent who's crashed often. So it just did not make sense for Williams, and it's understandable why James Vowles took that urgent call, and kudos to him. He had the guts to take a tough call at a small team like Williams to have a mid-season replacement. There have all sorts of rumors and reports about Liam Lawson and Mick Schumacher being in contention. Lawson already did a similar job last year for AlphaTauri, so he would have been an obvious candidate. But there were a lot of complexities in bringing him in from Red Bull, because Red Bull themselves might need Lawson if they want to have a mid-season replacement at Red Bull or VCARB. And Vowles is not the biggest fan of Mick Schumacher, despite their Mercedes ties, despite Toto Wolff pushing Mick Schumacher's name. And it's not that he hates him, it's just that he doesn't find Mick Schumacher that enticing of a prospect. And there is good precedent to it as well, because the way he performed at Haas, he was also quite crash happy like Sargent at Williams. So it would have been a bit of a like for like replacement, and perhaps Mick wouldn't have crashed as much as Sargent, but that's something still Vowles doesn't want. So they promoted their own academy driver, Franco Colapinto, with just 9 races in the season. I think that made sense, that they have their own academy driver. He's driving in F2 this year. He's also won a race in Imola. So it was a good opportunity to promote their own talent. And he did well in Monza. While Albon scored points to finish 9th, Colapinto finished 12th. For his first race, that was an impressive result. And in that Williams particularly, that hasn't scored points a lot this season. Albon has only scored 6 points, and that's all the tally Williams have. They're 9th in the standings. So Vowles would hope that if Colapinto can score points in 1 or 2 races and just keep it clean and not crash for all the 9 races or for the remaining 8 races now, I think he would be quite satisfied with Colapinto, and that would be a good call. As for Sargent, as I said, I think it's good for him. Perhaps he just did not had it in him to excel so early in F1. He's just 23, and some drivers take time to mature. Being an American driver, the culture in America is quite different to Europe. So the things drivers like Oliver Behrman and Kimi Antonelli can do is difficult for Sargent to do perhaps. Who knows, 4 years down the line he does well in IndyCar or somewhere else, and he shapes up to be a very good driver. But in F1 at the age of 23, with a backmarker team like Williams, I think he was perhaps a bit too rushed. That's what many experts have said. You can have that pressure, and some people can crack under pressure at a young age like 23. For now, it seems like his F1 career is done, like for Latifi and Mazepin and De Vries. But I hope he gets a good drive in IndyCar and he does well over there. And the perfect redemption for him would be to come back to F1. I don't know which team hires him, maybe a couple of years down the line, but people are not hiring Mick Schumacher, who's an F2 champion. So Sargent is a quite far-fetched proposition, perhaps. But yeah, that was the Italian GP review from my end. Bit of a long episode, perhaps, because there was a lot to talk about the royal bottle job that McLaren did and the masterclass that Ferrari pulled off. The bottom line is, going into the final 8 races, if McLaren don't implement team orders, work as a team to prioritize Lando Norris, there is little chance of Norris winning the title. They will continue to being swarmed by Mercedes or Ferrari at races like Belgium or Italy. Mercedes had a 1-2 before Russell's disqualification, obviously, in Belgium. Ferrari could have had a 1-2, but yeah, Sainz did not have tires. But still, that was a very solid result from Ferrari. A race that should have been a McLaren 1-2 finish. And of course, if Red Bull recover their performance by quota, Verstappen is certainly not losing that driver's title at any cost. He just needs a better car to get into podium and win contention again and fight Norris on equal terms for at least 2 or 3 races. I think that run of races from Kota, Mexico, and Brazil, that's where Verstappen will target Norris and ensure that he leads the championship going into the final stretch of races. So, this is the time McLaren needs to capitalize upon. They need to learn in Baku. Let's see if they do or not, but that double header in Baku and Singapore will decide McLaren's Drivers' Championship challenge. The Constructors' Championship, they seem set to win. With Sergio Perez's struggles, there is little chance McLaren will lose the Constructors from this point. The only outside possibility is Ferrari mounting a charge. But if they have to win both championships, with Norris winning the Drivers, it is a steep climb. And the next 2 races in Baku and Singapore are crucial, super crucial for McLaren and Norris. They need to win, they need to finish 1-2. Norris needs to take both those race wins. If not, I don't know what happens after that. But yeah, Baku and Singapore is going to be interesting. Singapore definitely one of my favorite tracks. Last year it was the most epic race. But before that we have Baku. And last year's Baku race was forgettable, utterly boring. This year the way the pecking order is, Baku could be one of the best races of the year. This sort of competitive field with Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull struggling, Baku could blow up. I have heightened expectations for the Azerbaijan GP. I hope Baku delivers and we all get to say well done Baku once again. But yeah, that's all from my end on this episode. Arigato and stay tuned until next time.